It's finally happening. You ever get that feeling, like the universe just dropped something in your lap at the exact moment you needed it most, like you've been stumbling around in the dark for months, maybe even years, and suddenly someone flicks on the lights? That's not coincidence, that's readiness. And the fact that you're here right now, watching this, means you've crossed a line you didn't even know existed. You've moved from wanting change to actually being ready for it. And there's a massive difference between those two. Wanting is safe. It lets you fantasize about transformation without ever having to step outside your comfort zone. But readiness? Readiness is terrifying, because it means you've run out of excuses. It means you've reached that breaking point where staying the same hurts more than facing the unknown. Here's the truth. Readiness rarely announces itself with fireworks. It doesn't come with a manual or a motivational speech. It creeps in quietly, often disguised as exhaustion. One morning, you wake up and you're simply tired. Tired of carrying the same fears. Tired of explaining away your dreams. Tired of negotiating with a life that feels smaller than the one you know you were meant to live. That exhaustion is not weakness. It's your soul whispering, enough. And that is the moment where everything starts to shift. Because all this time, you've been preparing for this without even realizing it. Every challenge you endured, every heartbreak you mended, every disappointment you rose above, it has been forging something deeper within you. Not just hope, not just optimism, but resilience. The quiet kind of resilience that doesn't beg for certainty, but simply knows it can carry you through whatever comes next. And if you're seeing this right now, make no mistake. This is not random. The universe does not waste energy. You are here because it is time. Stay until the very end of this video, because the most important message is waiting for you there. And if this is already touching something deep inside of you, type 7. You reach a point where you stop explaining yourself to people who never had the right questions in the first place. For so long, you wasted energy trying to justify your decisions, defend your boundaries, and prove your worth to those who were never truly listening. And then one day, something shifts. You realize their approval was never the missing piece. You realize most of the so-called obstacles you've been circling around, lack of money, lack of time, lack of support, lack of knowledge, were not barriers at all. They were excuses, elaborate disguises you used to avoid the truth. You simply weren't ready yet. Because readiness isn't about having all the resources lined up. It's not about waiting for perfect timing or perfect circumstances. Readiness is about capacity. It's about becoming the kind of person who can actually hold what they've been asking for without dropping it, without sabotaging it, without shrinking under the weight of it. Worthiness isn't about deserve. It's about becoming expansive enough to sustain the very things you once thought were impossible. Think back for a moment. How many times in your life did you get exactly what you thought you wanted, only to push it away, abandon it, or destroy it? The relationship that arrived too soon, the opportunity you couldn't quite believe was yours, the success you achieved but never felt comfortable inhabiting. If you're honest, those things didn't fall apart because they weren't meant for you. They fell apart because you hadn't yet grown into the version of yourself who could live at that altitude. Receiving something before you're ready for it doesn't bless you. It exposes you. It highlights every crack in your foundation, every wound still bleeding, every fear still whispering. But when you are ready, when you've faced your fears instead of running from them, when you've healed your wounds instead of burying them, when you've stopped negotiating with your own potential, everything changes. You stop showing up to impress, to perform, to prove. You start showing up as yourself, fully. You stop making desperate choices from a place of scarcity, and instead, you make deliberate moves from clarity. You stop consuming endlessly to fill a void, and instead, you start creating, because you finally understand you are the source. And people notice, not because you're louder, not because you're trying harder, but because authenticity carries a frequency you cannot fake. Confidence doesn't need a spotlight. Readiness doesn't need a speech. People who are truly ready don't convince anyone of anything. They just move with quiet certainty, and the world adjusts around them. This is why timing matters. Every false start, every failed attempt, every night you almost gave up, but didn't, none of it was wasted. You needed the missteps, the delays, the detours. You needed to fail the way you failed. You needed to build strength in the dark. Strength that only comes when you have no other choice but to get back up. That's how the lessons carve themselves into your bones. That's how you earn the kind of resilience that doesn't evaporate the moment things get hard. So, if you're listening to this, and it feels different than it would have 6 months ago, pay attention. That's not random. That's recognition. Your spirit knows the timing. Readiness isn't about having the plan figured out. It's about finally being willing to figure it out as you go. It's about trading perfection for progression, trading certainty for trust. And here's the paradox. No one tells you. Being ready rarely feels like what you imagined. There's no lightning bolt from the sky, no soundtrack swelling in the background, no cosmic announcement. Most of the time, readiness feels less like triumph and more like surrender. Not surrender in the sense of giving up, but surrender in the sense of releasing the version of yourself that kept you small. It's the quiet moment when you stop fighting the current and finally allow yourself to move with it. The shift is so subtle you might miss it, but the people around you won't. They'll notice before you do. They'll see the boundaries you've started set. They'll feel the calm in your responses where chaos once reigned. They'll sense the difference in your choices, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you no longer beg for permission. Some will be inspired by it. Others will be threatened because your readiness will confront them with their own resistance to change. Your willingness to grow will shine a light on the places they've chosen to stay stuck. But here's the freedom that's no longer your burden to carry. When you're ready, you stop managing other people's reactions to your evolution. You stop shrinking to protect their comfort. You stop apologizing for becoming who you were always meant to be. This isn't selfishness. It's sovereign. It's the realization that you cannot truly love others if you're unwilling to love yourself enough to change. There's something no one prepared you for. Readiness has a loneliness of its own, not because you're abandoned, but because you're awake in a world where many are still asleep. You see things differently now. Conversations that once entertained you feel empty. Environments you used to endure feel intolerable. People you once idolized suddenly seem afraid and small. That loneliness isn't punishment. It's purification. It's life clearing out everything that no longer vibrates at your frequency. Because when you're ready, your energy shifts, and with it your connections shift too. Ready people don't just attract new opportunities, they attract new people. People who are not threatened by your growth. People who don't need you to shrink so they can feel secure. People who celebrate your evolution instead of questioning it. But before those people arrive, you'll walk through a season that feels barren. It's a desert phase. Everything familiar falls away. Your old coping mechanisms lose their power. Your old excuses sound hollow, even to your own ears. Your old identity begins to crack, and for a while you don't recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. It feels like loss, but it's not. It's a clearing. It's the shedding of skins that were never truly yours. This is the phase where most turn back. This is where they decide maybe the old life wasn't so bad after all. They retreat into the dysfunction that once felt like home, because uncertainty feels more dangerous than dissatisfaction. The desert is where you're most tempted to abandon the path. But here's the truth. If you can endure this phase, if you can sit with the discomfort of not knowing, if you can resist the urge to retreat into what's familiar, you will emerge transformed. Because the desert is not empty, it's sacred. It's where the illusions die and the truth survives. It's where your strength is refined. It's where readiness stops being an idea and becomes your reality. You come to understand something that shakes you awake. The things you once believed were the obstacles, the money, the time, the support, the knowledge, were never really the problem at all. For years you carried them like heavy stones in your pocket, convinced they were the reasons you couldn't step forward. But they weren't walls, they were shadows. What you lacked wasn't resources, it was readiness. You weren't yet able to hold what you said you wanted. You weren't yet prepared to handle it, to sustain it, to live inside it without tearing it down from the inside out. Because worthiness has never been about deserving. That's the trap most people fall into, waiting for someone else to declare them worthy, waiting for life to finally give them the stamp of approval. But worthiness is not external, it's internal. It's about capacity. It's about becoming the kind of person who can hold more without breaking. It's about being stretched wide enough to sustain the blessings you've been asking for without letting them destroy you. Think back, honest. How many times have you gotten exactly what you thought you wanted, only to sabotage it? That relationship that looked like an answered prayer but you couldn't trust it, so you pushed it away. That opportunity that came knocking at your door, but you didn't believe you belonged there, so you made sure it slipped through your fingers. That season where success finally started to flow, but deep down you still carried the story that you weren't enough, and so you quietly burned it down. That's what happens when you receive something before you're ready. It exposes your cracks. It magnifies the places you haven't healed yet. It shows you every corner where you still don't believe you belong. But when you are ready, when you've done the internal work, when you've faced your fears instead of numbing them, when you've stopped running from yourself and finally turned toward the mirror, everything shifts. Suddenly, you begin to show up differently. Not pretending, not performing, not bending yourself into shapes to fit someone else's vision of you. You just show up as yourself, fully, unapologetically, clearly. And that clarity spills into everything. You stop making desperate decisions out of scarcity and fear. You start making grounded choices out of calm, out of knowing, out of alignment. You stop endlessly consuming, searching outside yourself to fill the void. And you begin building instead. You begin create. You start turning your energy outward into something real, rather than letting it collapse in on itself. And people notice, not because you're louder, not because you're forcing them to see you, but because authenticity radiates. It doesn't need a megaphone. It doesn't need validation. It simply is, and it draws everything meant for it closer. That's the paradox. When you're truly ready, you no longer need to convince anyone of anything. Confidence doesn't need to be announced. Alignment doesn't need to be explained. Ready people don't waste their breath trying to make others understand. They just move quietly, deliberately, with purpose, and the world adjusts to their presence. This is why timing matters. Everything you've been through, every false start, every failure, every attempt that collapsed beneath you, it all had purpose. You weren't being punished, you were being prepared. You weren't ready then, even if you thought you were. You needed those failures. You needed those long nights. You needed those moments you almost gave up, but didn't. Because those were the moments that built your spine. Those were the moments that planted strength inside you in a way no easy path ever could. So, if you're here now, if these words are hitting you differently than they would have 6 months ago, that's your sign. That's not coincidence. It's confirmation. You're ready in a way you weren't before, because readiness is not about having it all figured out. It's about being willing to figure it out as you move. It's about finally trusting that you can handle the unfolding, even if you don't yet see the whole map. And here's the secret. Readiness doesn't feel the way you expect it. There's no lightning bolt moment, no dramatic music, no sudden clarity that makes everything easy. Most of the time, readiness feels like surrender. Not surrender as in giving up, but surrender as in letting go of the version of yourself that could never take you further. It feels like unclenching your fists. It feels like loosening your grip on the old stories. It feels like finally realizing that swimming against the current was never strength. It was self-sabotage. Readiness is the quiet decision to stop fighting and start flowing. Others around you will notice this shift before you do. They'll see the boundaries you're suddenly willing to set. They'll feel the calm in you when chaos comes knocking. They'll recognize the way you no longer chase after what doesn't align, the way you no longer beg for what doesn't belong. And some of them won't like it, because your readiness shines a light on their refusal to evolve. Your willingness to change threatens their comfort with staying the same. But when you are ready, you finally stop managing other people's reactions to your growth. You stop bending yourself into smaller shapes to keep them comfortable. You stop apologizing for becoming who you always were beneath the layers. And this isn't about arrogance or selfishness or cutting everyone off. It's about understanding a truth you avoided for too long. You cannot love anyone fully if you don't love yourself enough to change. And here's the part no one told you about. Readiness carries with it a kind of loneliness, not because you are abandoned, but because you are awake. Awake in a world where so many are still sleepwalking. You begin to see differently. Conversations that used to entertain you now feel unbearable. Environments you once tolerated suddenly become impossible to remain in. People you used to idolize shrink before your eyes. Their fears exposed, their smallness revealed. That loneliness isn't punishment, it's purification. It's the shedding of everything that no longer vibrates at your frequency, because when you shift, everything shifts. Ready people don't just attract new opportunities, they attract new people. People who don't flinch at growth. People who don't need you to dim your light so they can feel safe. People who clap for your evolution instead of questioning it. But before they arrive, there is a season you must walk alone. It feels like a desert. Everything familiar has fallen away. The coping mechanisms you used to rely on no longer soothe you. The excuses you used to cling to sound hollow in your own ears. The identity you've carried begins to crack, and for a while you may not even recognize yourself in the mirror. This is the place where most turn back. This is where they convince themselves that the old life wasn't so bad after all. They retreat into the dysfunction that felt familiar because uncertainty feels more dangerous than dissatisfaction. But here is the truth. That desert is not empty. It's alive. It's sacred. It's where the illusions fall away and the truth remains. It's where you're stripped of what you were never meant to carry. It's where readiness is no longer an idea, but a reality carved into your being. And if you can sit with the discomfort, if you can resist the temptation to turn back, you will emerge from that desert unrecognizable, not because you became someone else, but because you finally became yourself. Most people never make it through the threshold. They reach the edge of transformation. They feel the desert closing in around them, and they panic. The uncertainty feels heavier than the dissatisfaction they've been living with for years, so they retreat. They tell themselves that maybe the old life wasn't so bad after all. Maybe mediocrity is safer. Maybe stagnation is easier. They convince themselves that familiar dysfunction is better than the vast unknown that stretches in front of them. But here's the truth. That retreat is a prison disguised as comfort. When you go back to what you've outgrown, you don't actually return to peace. You return to the slow erosion of your soul. You return to the conversations that never go anywhere, the routines that keep you numb, the cycles that drain your energy day after day. You return to the version of yourself that always knew there was more, but was too afraid to reach for it. If you can resist that temptation, if you can sit with the ache of uncertainty instead of running from it, something miraculous begins to happen. The very not knowing that once terrified you becomes the soil where magic grows, because not knowing who you are becoming while you are becoming it is sacred. It means you are unfolding. It means you are no longer scripted by your past, no longer trapped by old patterns. It means you are in motion, alive in the middle of becoming. On the other side of that uncertainty is a version of yourself you've never met but always sensed was waiting for you. This version doesn't second-guess every choice, doesn't need endless external validation. They move with instinct, with inner clarity. They hold success lightly, without letting it inflate their ego. and they hold failure with grace without letting it define their worth. They aren't frantic, they aren't desperate, they aren't chasing applause. They are steady, rooted, magnetic. Not because they're trying to attract anything, but because they're finally living in full alignment with who they really are. This version of you doesn't waste energy forcing doors to open. They don't cling to relationships that require them to play small. They don't tolerate conversations that drain their spirit. They live differently. They speak with intention. Love without unhealthy attachment. Create without craving applause. They can succeed without arrogance and stumble without collapse. This isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity, and authenticity is irresistible. Here's the shift. When you are truly ready, you stop waiting for life to happen to you. You stop passively hoping circumstances will change, and instead, you become the force that changes them. You stop begging the universe for better conditions and start carrying better energy into every space you enter. You realize that the perfect moment you've been waiting for was never coming. Not because life was against you, but because the moment you choose readiness is the moment you create perfection out of whatever is in front of you. And the universe responds. Not because it suddenly decides to reward you, but because you've finally stopped sending mixed signals. You're no longer saying one thing while living another. You're no longer asking for abundance while operating from scarcity, asking for love while betraying yourself, asking for purpose while hiding from responsibility. When your thoughts, your actions, and your energy align, life has no choice but to echo that alignment back to you. But here's the reality no one likes to admit. You cannot fake readiness. You can't trick life into giving you more than you're prepared to hold. You can't manifest your way into alignment with pretty words while your choices tell a different story. You can't perform your way into authenticity or rehearse your way into courage. Readiness is earned. It is forged in the fire of failure, in the weight of disappointment, in the nights you thought you were finished, but decided to try again anyway. It is carved into you every time you choose growth over comfort, truth over pretense, alignment over approval. And once it's in you, it becomes automatic, an unshakable part of who you are. When you reach that place, everything begins to make sense. The delays that used to frustrate you reveal themselves as protection. The heartbreaks that once shattered you now look like initiation. The unanswered prayers become proof that you were being redirected to something better. You see that nothing was wasted, nothing was random, nothing was in vain. Every single step was necessary, because every single step was preparing you. That's what readiness really is. Not just preparation for what's next, but expansion into the worthiness of what you've been asking for all along. You become the vessel capable of holding it, of nurturing it, of not collapsing beneath it. And when you finally get there, you don't just understand why you had to wait, you're grateful that you did. So, if you're still here listening to these words, feeling something stir inside of you, take that seriously. If this message feels heavier than inspiration, if it feels like recognition, it's because you already know you're not here by accident. You're not drawn to these words by chance. You are here because you are finally ready. And here's the truth that most people don't want to face deep down. You already know the next step. You've known for a long time. The voice has been whispering, nudging, calling. You've tried to drown it out with busyness, with distractions, with excuses, with endless preparation that never turns into action. But the voice hasn't left. It's still here, and it's louder now, because your spirit is tired of waiting. Readiness doesn't come with a roadmap. It doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with clarity. It comes with the quiet but undeniable knowing that the life you've been living no longer fits. It comes with the realization that waiting longer will not make the leap less terrifying. It comes with the understanding that the only way to meet the future is to walk into it without certainty, without applause, without needing to have every detail mapped out. So the question is no longer, are you ready? That has already been answered. The fact that you've felt the shift, that you've recognized yourself in these words, that you've come this far, that is the answer. The real question now is, what will you do with it? because life has already chosen you. The only choice left is whether you will finally choose yours. There's a reason why the idea of the chosen ones echoes across every culture, every story, every spiritual tradition. Deep down, we all know that some people carry a fire that others can't see, a frequency that doesn't fit the world around them, a weight that feels both like a burden and a calling. And if you've made it this far, if these words feel like they were written directly to you, then you already know you are one of them. But here's the truth about the chosen ones. They are not chosen because life handed them easy paths. They are chosen because life did. Their journeys are marked by trials others could not endure, by storms that would have broken most people, by betrayals that cut deep, but somehow didn't kill their faith. The chosen ones are forged in fire. Their readiness is not theoretical. It's test. Every disappointment, every delay, every rejection was not proof of failure, but proof of refinement. Chosen ones don't wait for external crowns or titles. They don't need a certificate, a degree, or someone else's validation to confirm what they already know. Their evidence is their survival. Their proof is their persistence. The fact that you're still standing after everything you've endured, that's your confirmation. That's your initiation. But here's the paradox. Being chosen doesn't mean being comfortable. It means being stretched further than most could tolerate. It means carrying vision in a world that prefers blindness. It means moving at a frequency that others don't understand and often being misunderstood, resisted, even mocked because of it. Chosen ones don't fit in because they were never meant. They are here to build, to break patterns, to plant seeds for futures others can't imagine. And that weight, it's not punishment, it's responsibility. To see what others can't see, to feel what others deny, to move forward when everyone else clings to the past. That is the mark of the chosen. But let's be clear, being chosen is not about superiority, it's about service. The chosen ones aren't called to elevate themselves above others. They are called to elevate others by embodying a higher way of living. They are called to lead, not by preaching, but by becoming, by showing what's possible when you stop betraying yourself, when you live in alignment, when you choose courage over fear again and again. This is why your path has been so heavy, why it felt like you were walking through fire when everyone else seemed to glide through life with ease, because your story was never meant to be ordinary. Ordinary struggles couldn't prepare you for extraordinary purpose. The friction, the battles, the nights you thought you couldn't survive, they were sharpening you, chiseling you, shaping you into the one who could carry what others could not. And now comes the revelation. Being chosen means the excuses no longer fit. You can't hide behind not enough anymore. You can't pretend you don't know what's being asked of you. You can't numb yourself into sleepwalking while your soul screams for awakening, because chosen people feel the cost of avoidance more intensely than anyone else. Their spirit refuses to let them settle. The very things that once numbed you, comfort, distraction, denial, no longer soothe you. They feel like poison in your veins. So what does readiness look like for the chosen ones? It looks like moving when no one claps. It looks like holding the vision when no one else sees it. It looks like speaking truth in rooms where silence would be safer. It looks like walking alone through deserts most people would never enter, because something inside you knows there's water on the other side. And the universe, it conspires with those who are chosen, not by clearing every obstacle, but by sending the exact obstacles needed to awaken your strength. That betrayal that broke your heart, it was meant to strip away illusions. That loss that felt unbearable, it was meant to carve depth into your spirit. That delay that frustrated you, it was alignment disguised as waiting. Because chosen people don't just receive, they are prepared. And preparation doesn't happen in comfort. Preparation happens in fire. But here's the beauty. Once a chosen one stops resisting their identity, everything accelerates. The doors that refuse to budge begin to open. The people who are aligned with their purpose begin to appear. The path that once felt like endless fog begins to clear. Not because the world suddenly became easier, but because the chosen ones stopped pretending to be ordinary. They embraced their calling. They stopped apologizing for their difference. And when that happens, they become unstoppable. Not invincible, not free from struggle, but unstoppable, in the sense that nothing outside of them can take them off the path anymore. Failure becomes feedback. Delay becomes preparation. Rejection becomes redirection. Every step, even the painful ones, becomes fuel. So if these words feel like they are pulling at something ancient inside you, if you feel both exposed and seen, that is not coincidence. That is recognition. It's your soul remembering what it has always known. You are here for more. You are not random. You are not a mistake. You are one of the chosen ones. And with that knowing comes responsibility. You can no longer afford to shrink. You can no longer afford to pretend. You can no longer afford to wait for someone else to crown you worthy. You have been chosen by life itself, proven by the storms you've survived, marked by the fire you've walked through. Now it's time to choose yourself, to stop delaying, to stop hiding, to stop wishing for signs that have already been given. Because the truth is, the world has been waiting for you to rise. And maybe that's the greatest truth of all. The chosen ones are not waiting to be discovered. They are waiting to remember who they are, to remember the strength they've already proven, to remember that the fire inside them was never an accident. It was the signal, the compass, the evidence that they were meant to burn brighter than the world expected. So if you've ever felt too different, too intense, too much, understand this. Those very qualities are the markings of the chosen. Your difference is not a flaw. It is your proof. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs the version of you that no one else can replicate. This is the moment. No more hiding. No more waiting. No more pretending that you don't feel the pull. You've survived too much. You've been shaped too deeply. You've carried too many signs to ignore them. Now the path is already under your feet. All that's left is the only question left is, are you willing to finally